Are Pegasus faster than Earth ponies? It's a myth that has been in the game ever since flying was added, but is it true? Has anyone ever actually tried to find out? Well, I don't know if anyone else has, but I have. Like just now, and we're going to talk about that. So I decided that after some of my recent Ponytown experiments that I would eventually tackle this myth, and it is finally time to do that. I'm going to be using some experiments to see exactly how fast your pony or your character or whatever you want to call it is, and then compare it to the speed of a Pegasus flying. To begin, I had to build a track so I could take some measurements. So I did that. I settled on a simple lineup of horizontal black and white tiles, and I may or may not have made a mistake here and accidentally started with 18 tiles instead of 20 or 10 or 5 or something like that. Didn't actually mess with the experiment in any way, or at least I didn't think it did. Maybe it did. I ended up doing more experiments later anyway, but I don't think it actually hurt the experiment or anything like that. I think it only just made the math a little bit harder. So once the track was set up and everything like that, I had to make sure that the characters start in the exact same spot. To do this, I had both the characters start with the corner of their hooves touching the very corner of this lineup of black and white tiles. After that, I hit record and then ran across the track. At the end of the track, I stopped the recording and saved it with the other tests, the other recordings. I recorded every single attempt running across this line, this track, or whatever you want to call it. Once I had some without flying, I did the exact same thing with flying to see if there was any difference. Right off the bat, I realized that I may or may not have messed up again. It wasn't necessarily anything that hurt the experiment, but it was more so something that was very difficult to work around, because it became very difficult to line up the flying pony in the exact same position as the pony that would, stand and run instead. I fiddled with it and then realized that I could line it up on the ground and then fly without moving, since flying doesn't push you forward at all. Once I flew across the track and even ran across the track several times, I had a new myth pop up into my head. I started to wonder if the zoom level had anything to do with the speed of the character. Would zooming all the way out increase my speed by some small amount? Would zooming in do the exact opposite and slow me down, or speed me up? I had no idea, and I was actually very curious to try this out. This simple test of speed suddenly had extra variables that I wanted to test or try out, and I was very curious to see if there was actually any sort of change. So I began a second series of tests, running across the track while zoomed all the way out, and then doing the same while flying. Then running while zoomed all the way in, and flying while all the way zoomed in. You get it. This doubled the amount of testing, but my curiosity got way too great for me to just skip this very important detail. I also started to wonder about strafing. I wondered, would strafing, like moving up and down as you run across the screen or whatever, would that increase your speed or slow you down or anything like that? I will tell you right now, I'll go ahead and spoil the ending for this. Strafing is a really bad idea. It doesn't help your speed at all. In fact, it slows you down tremendously. So don't try the strafing thing, because it doesn't actually help. You'll actually lose a lot of speed if you do that. So if you're in any kind of race, try to go as straight as possible, because that's the best chance that you're going to have. What happened next? What happened after I tried all that stuff? Well, I had several bits of videos of me running along this track with different zoom levels, and some with me flying instead of running. This next step was to put all of those videos in a video editor and play them frame by frame. I decided I would cut the videos so that the very first frame is a single frame before the character begins moving. After that, I made sure to cut the videos at the exact same frame that the character reaches the end of the course, at the end of the track. I almost messed up here again, because I started with trying to get the very frame of the foot, like the very moment the foot left the track, but I decided to change it so that I can see the very frame that the shadow leaves the track instead. It was tedious watching multiple 5-second videos frame by frame, which surprisingly is tedious, despite them being 5 seconds long, but it was worth it in the end when the first set of results came in. The first set of results were wildly inconsistent, and I wasn't sure why at first. Sometimes flying would be a few frames faster, and other times running on land was a few frames faster. So I was confused on why this was the case, and I decided that I would need to conduct another series of tests so that I can find some level of consistency. This is when I decided to start measuring the player's shadow from start to finish instead of feet at the start and then shadow at the end. I also decided to use 10 black and white tiles instead so that the math would be easier, and so that the experiment would go on a little bit faster because trying to go across 18 is obviously a lot slower than trying to go across, 10. I made sure once again to make sure that the shadow doesn't increase in size or move at all when flying, and thankfully there is no change in shadow, size, or position when entering the fly mode. So I decided that I would start the track with the very edge of my shadow touching the very edge of the track, so I could accurately make measurements for when my shadow left the track or entered the track. And that was pretty much it. A second series of tests performed pretty much the same way as before, except with the starting position fairly adjusted, so that is exactly the same and everything like that. I again edited the videos the same way, making sure to have it so that there is exactly one frame before the characters move and ending it at the exact frame that the shadow leaves the track. The tests were complete and I compared the times of each video, edited side by side, and finally I had the answer to this myth. After all that testing, all that testing and everything like that, I finally concluded that the player speed is approximately 4.5 tiles a second. But the answer to the myth of flyers having an unfair speed boost is plausible. Yeah, it's plausible. It's plausible. I'm a little bit confused by this too. After several tests, especially on the second set, which was as fair as possible, flying actually was faster at least half of the time, but still not every single time. I want to clarify now that the time difference between running and flying was only ever 0.1 second faster, or like basically one frame faster. There was one single case out of all that testing where flying was 0.2 seconds faster, but that literally only happened one time, so it's hard to say for sure if I measured something wrong or something there. But where does that leave this experiment and this myth? Well, I think I know why there was still inconsistencies even after all of that, making sure everything was perfect. And I think that it comes down to the FPS of the game. The frames per second of the game may or may not have made it so that some cases of flying being 0.1 seconds faster would happen. So basically, I think the frames of the game, the game itself, the FPS of the game itself, was somehow making the Pegasus sometimes 0.1 seconds faster. At certain points, maybe the FPS just hit the perfect point, the perfect 60 FPS or whatever, and it made it consistent half the time. So I think this FPS may or may not have affected the experiment in some way, and I just can't really be sure. Now, I don't know if this really busts the myth or proves the myth, but I guess that's up to you to really decide. Personally, I'm in the middle. That's why I said earlier that it's plausible. The reason why is because I personally don't see that the devs are going to take any time, any extra time on their work of the game to make flying 0.1 seconds faster. But as I said, I think they actually might be that much faster due to the frames per second. Maybe it dipped or raised while flying and that changed it. Either way, if that is happening enough, flying is faster, but only by 0.1 seconds. So at the end of the day, flying is faster on the main map anyway, simply because they can just fly over almost anything. For example, the cliffs. If a earth pony or something without wings wanted to get over the cliffs, it would take them several seconds, possibly an entire minute to get up on the cliffs, whereas a Pegasus can get on there in like 3 seconds. So it is faster, at least most of the time, on the main map. Finally, before I do sign off, zooming in or zooming out does not actually affect speed, so there is no point in messing around with that if you are trying to outrun your friends or whatever. So yeah, zooming in had no effect at any point during these experiments, so there's that, I guess. But there you have it. The myth of flying being faster has finally and officially been tested. So that's going to do it for the video. I do hope that you enjoyed. I hope that you learned something here today, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. So that's going to do it for the video. I do hope that you enjoyed, and if you did, please do like, subscribe, and share, and do all of those wonderful things, because when you do those wonderful things, get access to wonderful content such as this. But that's not all you get. That's not all you get. You also get to become wonderful yourself, and I think we all want that. So do those wonderful things, and until next time, stay wonderful.